Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Late Night Hockey with Steven Psihogios. I'm Steven Psihogios, and I'm joined tonight by special guest Ben Steiner of 49 Sports. He's a Kingston Frontenacs reporter as well, on top of also being a USports reporter. And the reason why Ben is on tonight is because we got some USports to talk about. Logan Thompson, former Brock Badgers netminder, makes his NHL debut tonight. It wasn't an eventful debut. It wasn't a long debut, but Ben, still great to see a former U Sports athlete make his impact and get a chance in the NHL.
Well, it's 163 U Sports athletes who've gotten their chance in the NHL. Now, we've seen 3 this year with Thompson's debut tonight, and he didn't really stop many shots. He stopped 2 shots he faced. But most of his time tonight, he only was on the ice filling in for Fleury and the Vegas Golden Knights in the last 8 minutes and 15 seconds. And most of his time on the ice was spent going back and forth to the bench and back to the crease as Pete DeBoer and the Vegas Golden Knights tried to grind out a win to no avail against the Minnesota Wild.
He's had a good year this year, though, Logan Thompson, with the Silver Knights in 7 games. He's got a .946 save percentage with the Henderson Silver Knights. So he's having a good year in the AHL. And obviously, with the current situation with the Vegas Golden Knights, Oscar Dance couldn't play, and neither could Robin Lehner. He gets a shot to back up Marc-Andre Fleury. And you know what? 2 saves, stops them both, and a big night for U Sports. This is the 3rd U Sports player to play in the NHL this season. 163, as you mentioned, all time. So this is pretty cool. It's good to see U Sports athletes. This is a league that I've covered and you cover as well, getting some larger recognition at the pro level, because we watch a lot of that hockey, and it's great hockey. It's definitely one of the best kept secrets as far as hockey goes, because the compete level and the entertainment level is very high on a nightly basis.
I like to say it's the most well-known, best-kept secret in Canada because everybody knows that it's the best-kept secret, but is still unwilling to go check it out when they get the chance and when it's, of course, playing, which it isn't this year. But Logan Thompson, he gets his chance tonight, and I don't think it's all that surprising that he gets his chance in the NHL this year, because you look at what he did last year when he was in the ECHL. He had a .929 save percentage through 32 ECHL games. That's impressive at that level. It's impressive at any level. And even with Brock back in 2018-19, he had a .934. So he's been good at every level that he's played at. So getting the chance in the NHL was only a matter of time. And I think tonight, perfect situation. Team rallied around him. Unfortunately, they couldn't find the win, but they do get 2 goals as he is shuttling back and forth between the crease.
Yeah, he was very close to getting a win in this one, because when he came into the game, it was 4-1. And then all of a sudden, Vegas had a bit of a surge. They score a couple of goals. Dylan Coughlin, he scores his first career NHL goal, follows it up with 2 more to complete the hat trick in his 11th game here, or 12th game with the Vegas Golden Knights. And it almost looked like for a split second there was a chance that Thompson might pick up a win. Unfortunately, he didn't. But we'll look at this game now from an NHL standpoint. The Minnesota Wild pick up the 2 points, a big 2 points for them in that West Division, their 2nd straight win against the Vegas Golden Knights. Have you liked what you've seen from Minnesota so far, and what did you think of their performance tonight?
I thought Minnesota did well tonight. They really stepped on the gas in the 3rd period, especially when they got a couple goals and really drove Fleury out of that crease. And that led to Logan Thompson and the reason why I'm here tonight. And they do grind out the win eventually. I do think there's a bit of an issue that you have to look at giving up 2 late goals, because you can't do that when you get into the nitty-gritty parts of the season when points really matter. Right now, you can still sort of save yourself with a couple of results here and there. But when it gets to the point when it really matters, you can't be giving up 2 goals late in the game, because momentum shifts. And when momentum shifts in the playoffs, Vegas is getting that 4th goal. I have no doubt that the Golden Knights find that 4th goal if this game has elimination or really valuable points on the line. Not to say that these points aren't valuable. 2 points at the first game of the season and 2 points at the last game of the season, mathematically they're the same, but there's not the same sort of weight and importance behind them in the actual gameplay. So I think that's a worrying potential trend for the Minnesota Wild if they continue to shell goals late in games.
Agreed. You look, it kind of cost them last week too against Vegas. They were up, and Vegas, off of Mark Stone's brilliant 5-assist performance, was able to battle back and get the 2 points in the victory. So good observation there. Definitely something to monitor with this Minnesota team. I like what I've seen from them so far. I said earlier on the Late Night Hockey Twitter account, I'd say them and the Vegas Golden Knights have been the 2 best teams consistently in that West Division. Obviously, the Blues have dealt with some injuries, and so have the Colorado Avalanche. But just from what I've seen on the ice, because that's all we can judge, I think the Wild have been right there with the Vegas Golden Knights, and they pick up a big 2 points. Cling on to those 2 points tonight. I want to talk a little bit now about the Canadian division. We had the Oilers play the Senators tonight, and it was a blowout. It was it was ugly. It was one-sided, and it was over early. And this is to be expected with Ottawa. I think they've been a more competitive team than a lot of people thought, and compared to how it looked like it was going to go earlier in the year. But with the rebuilding team, Ben, you're going to have nights like this where it just feels like nothing's going right. And Edmonton, they have the high-end talent that Ottawa, they just can't match really right now at any level.
Yeah, I mean, Edmonton, you have two of the best players in the world. In Ottawa, you have Artem Zub on the back. That's one of those names that you're not going to remember in 5 years when this rebuild is hopefully done for the Ottawa Senators. I remember as a Canucks fan, we had guys like Ashton Sautner, he's still in the system, Tom Sestito, Jan Sove, guys who are just place fillers right now. And he's not going to be there in the end. This Ottawa Senators team, if they could, they would tear the thing down and just rebuild it. But you can't do that unless you're an expansion team, and you're going to have nights like this. And I think for everybody in the Canadian division, it's nice to play Ottawa because you get a bit of a pat on the back and a bit of confidence heading into some more difficult games against teams who, other than Toronto, are really all sort of in the same pack. So it's difficult for Ottawa, but at this point, they're sort of just being proud of getting two coaches fired in this Canadian division already.
Yeah, and Edmonton, that's a perfect example of a team that's kind of gotten, I call it standings fat, off of the Ottawa Senators. 6-0 against the Senators this season, 11-11 against the rest of the division. And that goes to show you exactly the point you brought up, was the fact that really, I think if you take out the top team and the bottom team, everything else in the middle is pretty even as far as this Canadian division goes. And Ottawa, they've definitely had a little bit more fight in a lot of the games this year, but you know, it's going to happen on a nightly basis in a season where you're learning. Like, this is a big learning season. They got a lot of young players in this lineup. I know they tried to bring in some veterans in the offseason, but they're still it's definitely a learning year, and they're taking their lumps along the road. So back to the West Division, though, and we'll hop right back to the Canadian Division after. I'll touch on it briefly. The Kings really beat up on the Ducks tonight. Adrian Kempe, he's been red hot for the LA Kings. He scored 6 goals in his last 3 games played. So he had a couple of chances to get another hat trick tonight. He was stuck on 2, couldn't complete the hat trick. And the Anaheim Ducks, I think John Gibson starting to look a little bit more frustrated. You had that last goal go off of Yanni Hakanpää and in the net like an own goal. It's going to be the Ducks. They're another team in rebuild, in fluctuation. They were a little bit more competitive to start the year. They've been in a lot of 1-goal games. Tonight was not a 1-goal game. They lose 5-1. With this Ducks team, I guess most people, we're just watching for the prospects right now, looking to see how the young kids do well. And well, at large, I'd say Trevor Zegras has been okay. It's hard to get too judgmental this early on, but guys like Maxime Comtois have stepped up. Sam Steele scored tonight. So this Ducks team, the results aren't there, Ben, but it's not necessarily a results-driven season for this team.
You're right. It's not a results-driven season for this team, and maybe the solution could be calling up a USports player who they do have on their taxi squad. Yeah. They do have Cody Curran, who played with the University of Calgary. He's on a contract with the Anaheim Ducks. In all realism, he's not the solution, but it would be nice to see a 4th USports player get into a game this year. But right now, it's the Trevor Zegras show. We saw what he did at the World Juniors. We saw people get really high on the prospect of Trevor Zegras dominating at the NHL level, and he starts off in San Diego, dominating at the AHL level. It was only a matter of time until he gets a chance at the NHL level, and he's getting that chance now. So I think just like the Ottawa Senators, the Anaheim Ducks are someone where you're thinking of this as a learning year, and you're just looking ahead to the future. And considering it lucky, they're not playing in front of fans this season.
Yeah, agreed. They're lucky that stadium's not packed on a nightly basis, because the Honda Center would not be a happy place this season for the Ducks. There's been a couple of tough losses along the way, too, including 2 back-to-back 3-0 blown leads against the Coyotes a couple of weeks ago. That stung. That would have been tough to sit out if you were a fan. But we'll stick in this West Division for one more game. Then we'll move right back to the Canadian Division, talk about the Canucks And the other game tonight in that West Division was the Arizona Coyotes and the Colorado Avalanche. And a second straight game where the Avalanche just pour it on offensively. Chance after chance after chance. Nathan MacKinnon back in the lineup tonight for the Avalanche. They looked great from start to finish. They give up a point, though, to the Coyotes because Antti Ranta is able to steal the show. And there's really not much else you could say about this Coyotes performance other than the fact that they were bailed out by a hot goalie who was able to steal them a point tonight.
I think we see hot goalies stealing games and stealing points all the time. We saw it in the North Division a few days ago with the Vancouver Canucks and Thatcher Demko stealing a game for them. We've seen it happen in Calgary and Vancouver with Jacob Markstrom. So Antti Ranta is just another one of these goalies who hit a bit of a hot string, and he was able to steal a point off a Colorado Avalanche team who I picked at the start of the year to win the Stanley Cup. I think they've got talent from top to bottom with a guy like Nathan MacKinnon leading the line and what they have on defense. If you get anything against this team, it's an achievement. And if you're the Arizona Coyotes and the mess that is in the desert, both on the ice and more off the ice, you're proud just to get any result against Colorado.
Yeah, they steal a point. They keep pace because, like I mentioned, the Blues really haven't been as hot as a lot of people thought they were going to be, at least what I thought they were going to be. And the Avalanche, they've dealt with injuries, but I agree, when this Avalanche lineup is healthy, I look at it really, they're so fast and they've got so much size on every line, not just offensively, but defensively as well. It's just such a strong blend of size and speed, this team. And it just feels like they're coming at you with every single line. Everybody's coming at you. And then you got arguably one of the best lines, if not, a top three line in the NHL with Mikko Rantanen, Nathan MacKinnon, and sometimes they have Landeskog on that wing. Sometimes it's Andre Burakovsky who rides shotgun. But either way, it's you have Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen on the same line. That's pretty lethal. And I agree. I had the Avs as a team circled to win the Cup. I didn't make a true Cup prediction, but that was the team I was kind of leaning towards in the preseason. And they've dealt with a lot of injuries, so it's hard to give a full, honest assessment of what they've done so far. But that's a team that, as long as Philip Grubauer can hold his own, they've got a shot. They definitely have a shot. Let's move now to the Canucks. We're taping this right after the end of the first period of that game against Montreal on Wednesday night. Not a great start for Vancouver. They got outshot badly, but only down 1-0, so they're not out of the game yet, but not a great start at all. Do you think this Canucks team here, this is obviously a lot of what this next question I'm going to ask you hinges on this result tonight. Do you think they are a team that can squeak into the playoffs given how they've come out of the gate so far this season?
So to questions like this, I always bring up the fact that Leicester City won the Premier League. Those odds were, I think they were 5,000 to 1. The Canucks have slightly better odds than that. Are they likely? No chance. I think last I checked, Natural Stat Trick had them with a 9% chance to make the playoffs, and Dom Luszczyszyn's prediction metric also had them at a similar level. So the Canucks, it's a 9-10% chance to make the playoffs. We've seen miracles happen before, but at this point, I don't think these Canucks make the playoffs. And if they do, what are they going to do? Make the 4th seed and get knocked out by the Toronto Maple Leafs within a week? So I don't think it's a positive for the Canucks to make the playoffs. We saw Jim Benning address the media a couple days ago, and he said words. Words didn't hold much meaning in that. And the Canucks are just, they're floating. They're not doing much. They don't really have a way forward. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. And I don't really see where this team is going. We got a little hint of what the potential of this team is when we saw them make the run in the playoffs, a run to the second round, but within a couple of goals of the conference final. And I think management might have gotten a little too positive on this team. And now they're paying the expenses. And we've got 2 massive contracts coming up in Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, who are now with the same agency. So it's going to come down to Jim Benning and the Vancouver Canucks to see whether they can handle those contracts and see if they can find success in the future. But this year, at this point, it's all but a wash.
And I was just about to say, you talk about how those contracts will need to be negotiated soon. Wouldn't you say this is kind of a disappointing lineup to see with these guys on cheap deals right now? Obviously, the NHL players make good money, but these are pretty cheap contracts considering what they're going to be worth once they get off these entry-level deals. Isn't it a bit surprising you think that Vancouver would be able to put together a better lineup around these 2 guys, given what their contracts are right now?
Jim Benning and the management group didn't handle the transition away from Daniel and Henrik Steen well. They signed Louis Eriksson to $6 million for 6 years in hopes of reinvigorating the Sedins and the Canucks power play for a chance in the end of the Sedins' career and maybe another run and make that team competitive again. It didn't pay off. We all know exactly what's going on with Louis Eriksson. He hasn't lived up anywhere close to his $6 million 6-year contract. And in the end, the Canucks have too many guys signed for too long and for too much money in hopes of keeping a team that wasn't good somewhat competitive. And now they have a team that could be good, but they don't have the cap space or the timelines to be able to make that team good and put the surrounding pieces around a good core in Bo Horvat, Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, and even Thatcher Demko at this point.
Yeah, because when you just look at it, like you said, Demko's not eating up a ton of salary. They let Markstrom go in the offseason because they thought Demko was going to be the heir, and then they brought in Braden Holtby as insurance. But Bo Horvat's contract is very team friendly. Pettersson, like I said, entry level deal, and same with Hughes. They're both not making what they're going to make once they hit the market for fair market value for those players. But you look at some of the other contracts like Brandon Sutter, Jay Beagle, Louis Eriksson, you mentioned it, and it's just guys who are easily replaceable. Like you can really find these guys any given off season. They just maybe got over loyal, a little too loyal to these players, and it's biting them big time because I really do think like a team in that situation, this should be one of your prime years to go make a big run at it. And it just hasn't, they just have not followed up last season very well. We talk a lot about the offense. What do you make of this Canucks defense? Because coming into the year, I was definitely a little bit more optimistic about this group, but they're amongst the top teams in the league in turnovers and giveaways. What do you make of the defense of this team? Because they don't do their goal, especially early in the year, they weren't doing their goaltenders many favors on a nightly basis either.
They weren't doing their goaltenders many favors on a nightly basis, but there are some players who I think have had a bit of a positive regression since last season. You look at Jordy Ben, who could barely get into the lineup last year. He's playing regular minutes for the Canucks now. Quinn Hughes, he may have a couple issues this season. There's been some rumors that there's a nagging injury going on. Of course, in these days, we don't get many details on injuries, but I do think it's a substantial loss that they lost Chris Danev and Troy Stetcher, a guy who bleeds blue and green from the minute he was born in Richmond, BC. So you lose two locker room guys and good defenders in their own right. It's going to take a hit. And while Travis Hamonic has filled in at some level, that was something that was pushed by Coach Green in the late stages of the offseason because he looked at his roster and knew it wasn't good enough. And Jim Benning hadn't built him a roster that was good enough to compete. And at that point, Travis Hamonic, a veteran defenseman, was really the only option to keep this blue line competitive. And while the top is fine, Nate Schmidt, Quinn Hughes, they're great players. It's not enough to carry a team into the playoffs.
And you mentioned Green, head coach Green. He's one of these guys that you hear, obviously, whenever their team comes out and is a little bit disappointing, you typically hear rumblings that maybe there's a change coming at head coach. Like you said, we've already seen two in this Canadian division with Montreal and Calgary. You haven't really heard the same as far as Green goes. I don't think the Canucks should get rid of Travis Green because I think he's a good head coach. What do you think about Green? Do you think he's done an all right job with the cards that he's been dealt? Because I think sometimes the coach can be looked at as the scapegoat, but we've talked about the job Benning had and the lack of a solid product he's been able to put on the ice. I don't think that should necessarily fall onto Travis Green's shoulders and be a knock against him.
Yeah, I think Travis Green is the least of the problems with the Vancouver Canucks. I think the problems go right from the top with Francesco Aquilini. Jim Benning last week said that he has day-to-day contact with Aquilini. Day-to-day contact. Are you supposed to have day-to-day contact between the GM and the owner of the team? So that's clearly indicating that Aquilini has a very hands-on approach, wants his hands on the roster of this team, and he's not a hockey guy. He's done okay in the business. He's done very well in the business realm and real estate realm in Vancouver, but he doesn't know how to build a hockey team, and I'm not confident Jim Benning does either. So those two sort of running the show and Travis Green dealing with the cards he's dealt, Travis Green isn't the problem. But with the situation that is there, Travis Green might not be there very, very much longer because he doesn't want to deal with the stuff that's happening higher up in the organization.
So this is going to lead me to ask you a question now. What do you think is the next move as far as roster moves go for this team? We know that they got to get Hughes and Pettersson under contract, and that's priority number 1 and 2, or 1A and 1B. But where do you go next with this team? Do you let these contracts kind of expire? Like the Sutter deal isn't going to last forever. The Eriksson one feels like it's going to last forever. But what's the next move for this team? Like, where do you see the Canucks going? Because I think when you look at it, they've got pieces in place. The way Demko's played lately, I think he's starting to come on and show why they gave him a full vote of confidence. There's no doubt that they've got the young forward talent it takes to grow with, and a strong young forward core. Hughes is a staple on defense. Schmidt was a nice acquisition. But what is the next move for this team? Where do you see this team improving it, and why do you think they need to improve in that area?
The team needs to improve in the bottom six. We've seen a bit of improvement on the Canucks with the introduction of Mark Michaelis, a NCAA free agent signing in the offseason. And we've also seen some stuff from some younger players getting into the lineup. But it's not enough for the Vancouver Canucks to have success with those NCAA free agents getting into the lineup. First of all, you don't have Judd Brackett there, who is a great judge of NCAA talent. So the guys you're bringing in at this point might not be much better than what you already have. At this point, the arms of the Vancouver Canucks are pretty tied because you have Brandon Sutter, you have Antoine Roussel, you have Louis Eriksson, you have Jay Beagle. I could go on and on and on about this. You don't have many moves that you can make at this point. You have to let those contracts run out before you can really put the surrounding cast around the star players that you need. First priority has to be securing Pettersson, Demko, and Hughes. Those are all going to come up fairly soon, Pettersson and Hughes this summer. But you have to surround them with something, and that's not going to be able to happen until the other money is off the table.
So in a season of gloom, and we've talked a lot about the gloom, let's kind of focus on the positive a bit before we, wrap this up. What would you say have been some of the positives for the Canucks this season? I'd say some of the new lineup additions have been playing well, like guys like Nils Hoglander and Nate Schmidt. So would that be your source of positive news for the Canucks, or is there something else that's caught your eye early this year?
I think positive news goes right down to two words: Nils Hoglander. That's it. That's the only positive news on this Canucks roster this season. Everybody else has negatively regressed except Jordy Ben, who I mentioned earlier. He's been a bit of an improvement, but are you going to win a Stanley Cup if Jordy Ben's playing well? I think at this point in Jordy Ben's hockey career, we know that isn't going to be the case. But Nils Hoglander, that's somebody you can win a Stanley Cup with. And the skill that he's shown, he tried the Michigan a couple nights ago. It didn't pay off, but at least he tried it. And he has that little spark to him that so many young players have. And I don't think Travis Green's a coach that squeezes out that spark. I think you look at some coaches, they try and say, make the safe play, do the boring thing, dump it in, chase it. Travis Green isn't like that. He wants to see Nils Hoglander try the lacrosse goal or the Michigan or however you want to say it. And he's really been the positive on the Canucks this year. And the only reason people are really interested in this team is the young talent that comes in. There's been Quinn Hughes. There's been Elias Pettersson. There's been Brock Besser. And now there's Nils Hoglander that keeps this fan base interested. But that pipeline isn't going to last forever. Eventually, the team will have to start winning, or people are just going to get lethargic and lose interest in Vancouver.
I agree. I think when you look at all these teams in the NHL, even, a little bit more granular, the Canadian division, you look at these teams, really no team has seen an influx of young talent over the last 2-3 years really come in and step up like the Vancouver Canucks have. And it's a shame that at this point that they're not able to put a competitive roster. We haven't even talked about Brock Besser yet either, who is having a good year this season as well. So you have all these young players, and by and large now they're all starting to click. We know Pettersson was struggling a little bit out of the gate, but he seems to be playing a lot better now. Yeah, it is unfortunate, but Nils Hoglander, you watch him on a night-to-night basis, and he just brings that compete every single night. And he's a smaller forward, but he plays with a lot of heart, and that's something that is going to endear himself to that fan base, and it has already. So I like the Canucks. I like the good of the Canucks is very good, but unfortunately it's outweighed by a lot of bad this year, and we've seen the bad kind of take over the storylines. But like I said, I think potentially we're going to get a shakeup in that front office, and I think they're wise to keep Travis Green. So that's going to wrap up the Canucks talk and this episode of Late Night Hockey. Ben, thank you so much for joining the show today. It was kind of like a last second impromptu. Let's go. Let's get it going, because neither of us were expecting Logan Thompson to get in tonight, but it was really good to see him. And Ben, anything else you want to talk about? This is guest choice, last choice, anything on your mind, hockey related, you'd like to talk about?
I know a lot of your viewers definitely know that CIS USports hockey is a league to watch, and I think we've seen this season with the players in the ECHL, the AHL, and now the NHL, 3 of them this season. It is a league to watch. So whenever USports hockey comes back, hopefully in the fall, I've heard some rumors about potential shortened season or abbreviated seasons. Just make sure you go out and support your local teams. If you're not in school, it's still cheap hockey. Tickets are $10 most of the time. So give your schools a chance and take a look at USports hockey, the most well-known, best-kept secret in Canada.
Awesome. Agreed. I know from being on campus, it was a cheap night out, and you got your money's worth. There was definitely no questions about that. So, Ben, great message. I agree 100%. Thanks so much for joining this episode of Late Night Hockey. It's really appreciated.
It was my pleasure, and anytime.